Hello everyone, I'm Rabbi Chaitovsky here at my office at BMH-BJ. I've missed you. I've been away for a few weeks and have not done a video. I just got back from a trip to the land of Israel, my first in a good number of years, and it was an overwhelming experience on many levels. And I'm going to have a lot to say about it over the next few weeks, as well as over Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. But as usual, we're here anticipating this week's Shabbat and the Torah reading for Shabbat. And this week here in America, we're reading the Torah portion of Korach. This portion was already read in the land of Israel last week. And that's a story on its own as to how the Torah portions are out of sync for a little while longer until we join them together again and we're back in sync. But the Torah portion of Korach is essentially the story of, let's call it the mutiny on the bounty. It's the rebellion of Korach and his followers. Korach was otherwise a great person. He had a stellar lineage, and he seemed to be a little concerned that Moshe was elevating those closest to him, those nearest and dearest to him, to positions of power and positions of holiness. And he seemed to say something very reasonable. He says, Rav lachem, this is too much for you. Ki chol ho'edah kulam kedoshim, the entire community is holy. Uvatocham Hashem, and in their midst is God. Umadua titnasu al kahal Hashem, and why are you elevating yourselves over all the others? And at first glance, Korach's message or Korach's idea that everyone is holy and no one should be elevated more than any other seems to resonate with us, seems to make some sense from a democratic point of view. But the irony is that Korach is angling for a position of leadership. He himself is angling to be elevated over others. And it's not so much the idea that everyone is holy that is the problem. It's the disconnect between what he's after. He's clearly after a position of power and a position of leadership, thinking that he's been passed over. And yet he's complaining to Moses, why are you elevating yourselves? Everyone is holy. No one is more holy or more worthy than any other. And yet, at the root of his complaint, at the root of his platform, is his feeling that he is more worthy than others. And this was a disastrous moment in the history of the Jewish people, the nascent Jewish people in the desert. And Korach was quashed, his rebellion was quashed, and the rest, as they say, is history. But I want to talk a little bit about Korach. I had an interesting experience in Israel with a young man who actually is connected to a family here in Denver. But while that family in Denver is a very Jewishly steeped family, this young man was anything but. But he was there exploring Israel on a very special program, a program for which he was handpicked. He's a very bright and intelligent and well-spoken young man. And I met him at services, and he was very uncomfortable, and he had to leave in the middle of services, and I followed him out because I had to be at another synagogue. And I saw him, and I introduced myself. And he said, this was a bit overwhelming for me. I'm really an atheist. And sitting there at services is just not really my bag. That's the wording he used. It's not my thing, and I just had to get out. And I want to be open to things, but I can't get over that. And then he went on to say, we were reading the Torah portion of Korach, weren't we? And I said, yes. I said, how did you know that? And he said, well, it happened to be my bar mitzvah parsha. And he pointed out a certain irony to me, which was that his name was Moses, or Moshe, And he said to me that by name, I should be identified with the hero of the story, the classical Jewish hero of the story. But I know that in my own mind and in my heart, being an atheist and having all the other issues that I have with Judaism, as it's been presented to me anyway, I probably am more aligned with Korach. I thought that was just an amazingly insightful and even devastating comment for this young man to make. And I assured him that he didn't really have to see himself in that way. And we began to discuss what was really wrong, or what may have been wrong with Korach from the Jewish point of view. And it boiled down to, and he agreed with this, it boiled down to not so much that he felt that everyone is really holy. I mean, that democratic idea has its place, but it can also descend into demagoguery. And that's what often happens. And that is what he said happened to Korach, probably. It was the way he said what he said. It was the fact that he himself was angling for that position that made the words that were coming out of his mouth ring a little bit hollow. And he said that he is going to commit himself during this trip to Israel to try to navigate and try to find his place somewhere between the extremes, as he called it, of Moses and Korach. And I couldn't argue with that. I never looked at Moses as an extremist. I certainly saw that in Korach. But if that's going to be the portal through which he is going to find where he belongs, if that's going to be the continuum where he is going to situate himself, I applaud that. And our tradition reminds us of Korach all the time. In Pirkei Avot it says that the arguments of Korach and those that followed him are considered arguments lo l'shem shamayim. They're just not altruistic. They don't have the pedigree behind them that mark them as authentic arguments. There's too much ego involved, and there's too much of Korach's self involved. And Moshe was just the opposite. Moshe had very little ego, according to our tradition. He was anav mikol adam. He didn't want the leadership position, but he knew he had to take it. Korach didn't know if he was suited for it. He assumed he was, and he wanted to grab it, and he just cloaked the grab in language that should make all of us pause. Have a wonderful Shabbat. I'll see you in Shul.